Here's the second idea. How do we become an interactive enterprise? That is not a kid, that is a junior programmer at Apple. I'm just kidding. So how do we become an enterprise? And it's being referred to a lot in the media now as an interactive enterprise. An interactive enterprise has three unique qualities. Quality number one, they are customer-centric. They make sure and test every leap of faith in their business model. Leap of faith number one, who is our customer? Leap of faith number two, what does the customer want? Not what they need, because I can't tell you how many companies created something that the customer needed but did not want. The whole essence of disruptive innovation is that you take a market that's being overserved and you underserve it and create a brand new business, right? And then the third question, the most important, is are we real-time or are we delayed? Because an interactive enterprise not only can move on a dime, their rich information is going to resonate with people like my kid, 26, this next generation of business people that will expect all supplier information to not only be real-time, they will expect it to be mobile. They will expect applications to be able to connect into legacy systems, allowing them to do everything from monitoring like a FedEx package exactly where everything is and paying for it on their iPhones. This is a remarkably unique culture that we're facing into. So how do we do both these things? This is where I get to the advice point of the talk. I want to say that there's three basic steps in my mind. Two of them are psychological and one is process that really help you make that leap to capture a lot of what John McKean was talking about with Information Masters and how to emerge as that interactive enterprise that can absolutely put the right thing in the right place at the right price, which I think is so key to moving forward. First idea, number one, overcome scarcity thinking. Scarcity thinking is when we develop the following response system. There is not enough to go around. We actually begin to believe that our data is worth something. Now, this is a unique concept, but I actually sourced this back to Stephen Covey, Sr. Stephen Covey, Sr. talked about the scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset, not enough to go around, fundamentally changes us as people. It causes us to react very uniquely in situations where normally when we should cooperate, we can compete. When we should share to create more value throughout the chain, we hoard information. But the issue is, why does the scarcity mindset happen in our business? Well, you know, I think a lot of it happens because of economic conditions. Napoleon Hill, I referred to him once, he wrote a book in 1937 called Think and Grow Rich. And the premise of that book was that for the highly successful, highly intelligent person, the fear of poverty is the greatest fear known to man. And it changes the way we act. And it causes us during times like this to really hold on to the peanuts. But the bigger thing I've seen, and again, in a different industry than yours, but I bet you it's the same thing, is that when information is expensive to acquire in the first place, we hoard it. So hard to get, so hard fought to store and manage. Letting go of it down the chain, especially to the distribution channel, seems like you're giving away the keys to the kingdom, even though many of the best distributors will promise you that that data will not show up in the hands of a competitor. Still, incredibly difficult to let go of. But when I look at highly agile organizations, they understand something. Data is like an idea. It's worth nothing. This is a crazy idea, but Steve Jobs used to always say, if your idea is any good, you're going to have to shove it down the world's throat. He used to tell this to people all the time who were trying to keep their idea for a business secret so it wouldn't get stolen, instead of trying to go out and build partnerships and go out and build relationships out in the real world. The other issue to think about with data is that if you can't turn data into action, it becomes a storage bill. So let me talk a little bit about this whole concept of how do we begin to let go of information. There is a process. Now, my good friend Dr. Jim Goodnight out in Cary, North Carolina has a business intelligence software company called SAS Institute. What a remarkable case study on how to run an organization, make it people-centric, keep your turnover low, and be the second most productive company in the world, next to IKEA, who has no employees. So if productivity is tied to employee count, then it makes sense, because I could take over an IKEA store with a butter knife. You know what I mean? If you've been to one, you know what I'm saying. But what Mr. Goodnight taught me is that what really moves the needle for a business that becomes proprietary is insight connected to your business concept. What he's learned is that there is a process by which we glean insight out of this pile of junk called data. Unfortunately, what we realize is that one man's junk is another man's treasure. This is the whole idea of that what you consider just standard data for many of the folks in your value chain, that is very important for them to optimize their business and meet customer needs. So data at some point, through some way, either through technology, through interactive sharing, through feedback that comes up from the customer, through the distribution channel, data eventually turns into knowledge. In other words, you begin to get verified learning. When I look at startups that are raising capital, I don't care about these vanity numbers. I call it success theater, where they say, well, this is how fast our business is growing on gross profits, and this is how fast our usership is growing, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all vanity metrics. They really don't answer for you how well your product's doing on an innovation business. In the research now, we call that innovation accounting. Innovation accounting says that you can tell the strength of a business by asking the following question: how do they know that their products and services are actually getting better at meeting customer wants? How do they know? Verified learning. So as you begin to go out and share data and compare notes, you begin to get very solid feedback from the customer or the customer's partner about exactly what they want and what they're going to spend money on. And it begins to eliminate this psychosis where we keep focusing on what we think they need and we keep drawing it up on whiteboards and wondering why it just doesn't stick. But at some point, verified learning, once you have enough of these incidences, becomes insight. And it becomes insight that's very proprietary to your business, and that's what's precious. The good news is that for many of you, even that insight, if leaked, has no negative impact on your model because very few business concepts are exactly the same. So insight then becomes this knowledge I know how to use that connects to my business concept and actually makes me an information master because I can leverage that better than a competitor, especially a competitor who's still holding on to the data. How does it done, though? I think this is the interesting thing, is that the insight cycle, and this actually goes back to quality process management that Mr. Deming and Crosby and Duran used to teach. The insight cycle has 3 pieces, but most people don't get the first one right. I mean, often we think that the way that we convert our business experience throughout the chain to actual customer insight is by listening and learning. But what we've actually seen in the research, especially for the information masters and the interactive enterprise, is that the first step, the bottleneck, the psychological barrier to entry is sharing information. When we start to share information, we begin to realize right away that raw information is useless because as we share it and it comes back packaged with insights, say from the distribution or the customer channel, all of a sudden we realize that we have the capacity now through sharing to actually listen and learn. This is a critical idea. At Yahoo, we practice this because one of the things that we heard from Jim Collins, from Good to Great, when he came and lectured to us, is he said, letting go of your information is the first step to letting go of the status quo. He said in any technology business, we have this false sense of security that information and ideas are worth something. He asked me a question once. He says, Tim, what's more important, ideas or people? Of course, I said ideas at the time because I didn't know better. And he explained, wrong. It's people. Because you can take a perfect idea, give it to 5 numbskulls, and they'll screw it up every single time. We learned at Yahoo that we had to let go of information. We were an ad business, so we had to let go of precious data on searches and algorithms we'd written for proprietary searches. We had to let go of that and give it to ad agency world. The same world that talked to Microsoft and Google and Excite and Lycos on a daily basis. I can't tell you how hard it was to let go of those peanuts. But as we let go of the information, we discovered something incredibly breathtaking about the potential of the platform. I'll just give you one example. This is something called the Buzz Index. This used to be behind the firewall. Now everybody has it. Like Twitter, if you go to twitter.com and look at a feed, you'll see something called trending. Now everybody does it. So you know in real time what's going on in the data pile at all these interactive companies now because that becomes a source of customer value, not a source of enterprise value. What we did is create an index that measured the volume of search against a term every day, like Ford Focus. And then we measured where the clicks went to determine sentiment, positive, negative, or neutral. And we trained the algorithm, had a couple of rocket scientists in cubicles. They worked on it, and it became a predictive engine that drove $250 million of revenue in 2002 and 2003. It became the strategic foothold Terry Simmel used when he came into Yahoo to win the movie business back. We actually created an algorithm that could predict with 80% or more accuracy how big a movie would open on its first weekend, and the prediction was usually locked Monday of that week, giving our partners 4 or 5 days to optimize everything, from trailers to marketing to distribution. And it was the awesome jewel in the crown that I think kept Yahoo in business. Not enough to win against Google for a variety of reasons I'll warn you about later, but it was strategic. And it started with these guys. By letting the information go to the ad agency of record, Foote, Cone, and Belding, what they begin to learn is that online data, even raw search data like this with a simple algorithm, could help them measure better than focus groups the impact of a press release, the impact of sponsoring a television program like the Video Music Awards, the impact of an interactive campaign, or even winning Car of the Year. And it changed the way major brands measured marketing forever. And for us, it was a huge release. The last thing I want to say about this is that one of the things we can do to completely shift our paradigm around this scarcity model of information and letting go of the peanuts is to rethink the concept of competition. One of the books I'll recommend to you if you email me, I'm tim@timsanders.com. One of the books I'm going to recommend is a book called Co-opetition. Co-opetition is a brilliant book written by Peter Schmidt, and what it studies is it studies various industries where competitors realized that if they came together as one and shared information, they could have leverage up the supply chain. One of the classic examples they always talk about that I think will make a lot of sense to you is the airline industry. Now, many of you know that United and American hate Virgin America. I'm just kidding. United and American compete. They compete like wrestlers. They trash talk each other. They fight for precious market share. They do that most of the year. There is a 2-week period where they get together as friends. It's called competimates. Like two wrestlers at Denny on Saturday night after the fights. And they compare notes. Why do they do this? Because at some point they got to go meet with Boeing out in Washington or McDonnell Douglas and negotiate. And they've found that when these competimates get together and let go of the information peanuts, only withholding insight tied to their core business concept, say like loyalty or pricing issues around tickets, when they share information on gross manufacturing margins, they come together locked arms against Boeing. And in the book Co-opetition, the author claims they've been able to drive the cost out of the channel almost 7%. And in the airline business, that is millions and millions of dollars over a decade, billions of dollars. I suggest that the competimates model might work a little bit for you. I do some consulting with some defense contractors, which could be, there's medication for that, by the way. And what's really interesting to me is that Raytheon, who's really gotten this competimates vision, has begun to experiment with being more cooperative, especially in avionics with Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, and their gross margins are skyrocketing because of the leverage now they have up the chain. In fact, avionics, according to Bill Swanson, almost has a 30% operating margin now. Okay, that's software margins. That's crazy high, but it comes from the kind of leverage you get when you realize your competitor isn't the company that does what you do. Your competitor is whoever is taking your customer dollars away from you. That's why so many companies get surprised by these out-of-nowhere companies that aren't even, quote, in their space. That's why I get so scared when I hear a young business person say the following: we have no competition. Oh, yes, you do. It's whoever wants your market share. So I really challenge everyone to test this theory of sharing and giving away information and see what you learn. Again, I'd love to hear from you about this. I'm tim@timsanders.com. So overcoming that mindset, I think, is step one, because it allows you to really think a lot bigger and really think a lot better for the customer. Step number two, spring your time traps. Spring those time traps. I talked about Nokia earlier. I mean, the problem from Nokia was two things. They live out of their inbox, and they meet 40 hours a week, maybe 50 hours a week. That is not good time management for an execution-prone organization. Becoming an interactive enterprise requires ruthless execution, ahead of schedule performance in the world of business, and you can't do it if you don't have time to work on your work at work. So as crazy as it sounds, as I've noticed companies have high execution standards, like watching how Google outperformed us, how this little gaming company called Zynga outperformed, how Groupon went from nothing to what are they, I mean, they're restating earnings. So let's say $10 billion worth of value in less than 3 years. They got stuff done yesterday. How do they do it? They don't waste time. Think about, in the quality movement, the definition of waste. Waste is anything that doesn't create customer value. So waste is anything you do or spend money on that doesn't create customer value. That's a core concept. Ray Anderson, Interface Incorporated, a big modular carpet company, really coined that phrase. But that's interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about this because the scarcity of time, not enough time to go around, its own unique breed of the scarcity mindset, will cause you to defend the status quo, even when you know it's time to pivot in terms of the business model. Whether it's a platform pivot like going mobile or opening up an electronic storefront, or a customer segment pivot like going in a different part of the value chain. So I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice to get your time back. Piece of advice number 1, eliminate information waste. Eliminate it. And I think that the most information waste in most of our lives is the incoming email and what it does to us. And I'm not talking about the spam. I'm talking about Uncle Spam. I'm talking about those people that you work with all the time. The CYA gang that causes you to get up in the morning and have 100 unanswered emails in your inbox, many of them with attachments for you to read, right? There is a concept, it started in Scandinavia because they've been online and broadband for years. It's called New Economy Depression Syndrome. Stop me if you heard this before. There are some people in the world that just consume too much information. They live in a constant state of being interrupted. Bells going off, texts going off, people coming up over the cubicle with an idea. And they have a reduction in face time. In other words, they begin to replace human contact with digital contact. You see it all the time at restaurants when the waiter walks away and the couple begins to look in their smartphone to see what they're missing from their fake friends. I see that all the time. But New Economy Depression Syndrome is when there's so much information coming in, you can't deal with it, and it actually stops you cold in your path. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas here. There's actually a website called emaila2z.com that'll give you a lot more, but email A to Z. I'm going to give you 3 different things to think about on a very personal level. And in this book, there's a bookmarker on everybody's table. I invite you to take one. The book's in your bag. I talk a lot about this idea that we've got to change our morning routines if we want to be people of action. So I want to just start talking about breakfast for your mind as my first point, because that's the most important meal of the day for you psychologically as well as physically. The first 45 minutes of your day sets the tone for the entire day. Am I behind? Am I ahead? Am I calm? Am I freaked out? And the worst possible strategy for a leader in the new world of having a good breakfast is to wake up and check your email first thing. Now, I used to do it, so I don't say this like I never did it. I've stopped doing it. A better morning routine would block out the first 45 minutes of your waking hours. And many people in the history of capitalism, from Henry Ford to Michael Dell to my old boss Mark Cuban to new school leaders like Mark Pincus at Zynga, they practice this religiously. The first 45 minutes of the morning is 2 things. Load your mind with confidence-building material. Books are very well-written, researched, neutral articles that make you better at what you do or help you absorb what's coming next. One of the things that impressed me the most about Mark Cuban when I met him and went to work for him in 1997 was that he had read about 75 books that year, and it was July. He'd read 75 books about technology, internet protocol, design, the media business. The guy was a walking encyclopedia. At a meeting like last night, he would have broke away from it at 8:30 because he would have to get to his room to get another hour of reading, and because he told me the future's in the bookstore. That's why he bought a piece of the Philips patent for high definition with his first startup cash back in 1996. That's why he has HDNet today. He read a book about it called The Entertainment Economy in 1992 that said that HD cost, it was called telepresence back then, would drop faster than the price of computers, and by 2010 you'd buy them at Walmart for $1,000. He knew that in 92. That's some strategic insight, because every morning he got up and instead of checking his email and starting out his day down 100 notes, he started out every day putting confident stuff in his head. Readers are leaders. You read a book every month that makes you better at what you do, and you'll crowd your mind with that stuff, and you won't have much room left for worry, resentment, or gossip. But let's talk specifically about how to get rid of email in your life. 2 rules. Number 1, the SORTA rule, S-O-R-T-A. You want to change the culture at your company? Put the following in the footer of your email. Please help in joining me in my capital letter SORTA campaign, which stands for Stamp Out Reply to All. I participated in a study by Pitney Bowes, 30,000 people like you and I, and what we learned is that reply to all is used correctly around 12% of the time when you're tracking on a project or for legal reasons. The other 88% of the time, somebody thinks email is their private cable access channel to the universe. Somebody sends you an email saying, let's have a meeting tomorrow at 9:30, copies 15 people you work with. The first Yahoo who replies to all says 10 works better for me, elicits a firestorm of the meetings on your Crackberry, and you can't even get coffee in Atlanta when you're changing planes. Have you had this happen before? Reply to all is approximately 40% of all data exchange across the average Microsoft network for a Fortune 5,000 company. Do you hear the sucking sound of Slack? We've got to eliminate that concept and teach people to close the loop and to get rid of reply to all and make every incident beg for its life. The second idea. This is even harder. This is going to require tough love. It's very against my personality, but I use this to defend myself. It's called the CLEAR system. The CLEAR system is based on a book by Bill Jensen called Simplicity, about how to make your life simple and make your product simple. The CLEAR system goes like this. When I have one of these repeat offenders in my life that copy me on everything, email me on everything, reply to all on everything, at a point I realize they're pummeling me with information, friendly fire, so to speak. I send them a letter, and I'll send you the letter too. If you write me for the book list, ask me for the CLEAR letter. I spend a lot of time trying to make it not sound mean, but here's what it says. It says, I'm really busy, and the most precious resource of our enterprise is our time and our attention, and you're killing me with this volume. So please use the following acid test before you hit the send button to me again. And it's the letters C-L-E-A-R. C, is this email connected to my job? Well, that gets rid of a whole bunch of stuff. L, give me a list of things you want me to do about the incoming email. E, what are your expectations of me if I drop everything and get involved in this? A, what are my avenues to delegate this out throughout the company? And finally, R, what's the return on attention for me and the company? When I begin to use the CLEAR system, as Bill promised, it reduced my email. In fact, after about a year of practicing this, I cut my email in half, and you can too. So it starts first with getting rid of email. Second, and finally, you got to get rid of these meeting cultures where you sit around in a room and do information dumps and try to build consensus, because that's not the proper use of a meeting. You can do all that before the meeting. There's a great book called Read This Before Your Next Meeting by a friend of mine that'll be on my book list that really changes the whole idea that meetings exist to do one thing: make decisions and form agreements to execute on those decisions. That's what you get together with precious people and do. SAS Institute, I mentioned them before, they got less than 4% turnover. Can you believe that? Private company, doesn't even pay as much as their nearest competitor because it's a 40-hour week and there's no evening and weekend email in their culture. It's not allowed. You actually have a life when you work at SAS Institute. That's what they use to recruit. How do they do it? They've eliminated wasted meetings. They do not allow a meeting more than 40 minutes. To have a meeting, you have to have an agenda that proves it's a decision meeting and an execution planning meeting, or the meeting is canceled. Senior executives are told to get up and walk out at the 40th minute. Like the TED conference, they put clocks inside every meeting room that count down from 40 minutes because they realize that if you can create a culture where the average person only meets for 16 hours a week, that means they have 24 hours left to work on their work at work. And I challenge you to go attack those long meetings and question them at work. Now, I'm not talking about customer meetings here, but I've seen this happen at companies like Google and Zynga who counseled with SAS Institute on other issues, and it's changed miraculously their ability to do things really fast and make the pivot when the pivot's hard.